Hello and welcome back to the scientific writing class. Today the topic will be on plagiarism and referencing, because when you reference correctly you will avoid the plagiarism. Okay, what is plagiarism? What is it and how to avoid it? We are continually engaging with other people's ideas. We read them in text, we read them in the news, we read them in papers. So we have to give credit to those who have published these ideas first. So plagiarism means you use others' ideas and words without clearly acknowledging the source of that information. And to avoid this, I will give you some examples now in the following. So plagiarism is considered academic dishonesty. Very important. You can basically be expelled by the university if you plagiarize. It is subject to sanctions like penalties, suspensions, and even expulsion, as I mentioned before. And this wrongful appropriation, stealing and publication of another author's language, thoughts, ideas, or expressions, and the representation of them as one's own original work. If you just copy and paste from somebody else, you are plagiarizing. So when you use material from another source, another author, you have to give credit to this author, to this source. And if you're not quoting word for word, you must still cite the source where this idea comes from. And thus it's important that you are understanding the work you are citing. I often get papers to read, or I get master's thesis to read, where people reference papers and I can see that they have not really read the paper correctly because they state something which is not even the content of the paper. So you have to be careful what you use as a reference and what content you use it with. Because then if you don't know the content, you're also prone to plagiarism. So important that you understand the work that you're using. And here's an example of original sentence and a direct quote, how you could come back to this information in your work. So the original sentence is: the owners of international scientific English should be international scientists, not Englishmen or Americans. And the direct quote would be the following here, as noted by Wood. So you cite the author here, you put it in quotation marks, and you simply copy the text, but it's a direct quote, and it's very clearly stated who the author is. So you're giving credit to this author. And to avoid this plagiarism, so avoid the stealing of ideas, you have to cite the sources. So when you mention another person's idea in your paper, say who said it first. If the idea has been around for a while, you can cite the original source, then second, the most representative source, or the most recent source. This is when you have a lot of sources coming back to this one idea. You might want to also filter out the different sources and just use this rule as a rule of thumb. And the second rule here is also don't plagiarize yourself. Plagiarizing yourself means that you, even if you're referring to your own work, like I can refer to my own papers, I still have to paraphrase it. So I can plagiarize myself basically, and you have to avoid this. So again, consider the following suggestions. Make sure you're not plagiarizing others' work. Make sure you're not plagiarizing your own work. As I said before, even if it's your own work, you have to paraphrase it and cite it. Do perform a similarity check. That is a source. There are online sources that you can cut and paste your text, and you can see if somebody else has used this text before. And as I will talk about later in the editorial process, most journals will do this similarity check with your submitted paper. So this is important to know, because if you just cut and paste, the journal will find out and we will likely not accept your paper. To avoid plagiarism, basically you have to reference in a correct way. So when you are writing a piece of work and you use somebody else's words or ideas, thoughts, you must reference them, either paraphrased or as a direct quote. And you include the detailed information in all sources within your text. This is called the in-text citations, and typically in a reference list, bibliography, which is included at the end. This is how you avoid the plagiarism. I will show you now some details on how to do correct referencing. This is an example from the European Geophysical Union, the EGU. They have many open access journals, and you can access their guidelines very easily. So this is the journal guideline for the journal Earth System Science Data, but I think for the EGU they are all the same. And they very clearly say how you should use the in-text citations. They say in terms of in-text that the order can be based on relevance, chronologically or alphabetically listing. So here you see how you would include the reference. So you have the text here, or you can also include both the author and the year inside the brackets. Yeah, if you have several authors, then you include several authors with this source, several papers in this brackets. The nice thing is here they also now, or they have now these style files. Almost every software that you use offers this, that you can load these into your word processor or so, and they will help you with the correct formatting, because yeah, this is a lot of work to do this. Here's more on the journal guidelines for this journal Earth System Science Data. As an example, you have to check each journal separately because all journals are different, basically. And here they state explicitly how you should give the references, and for differencing here between single authors, co-authors, or team papers. And I give you an example from how it looks then in the text. So this is also from a paper from the same journal, and just to see here the in-text citation. This is done in a very chronological way. So alphabetically, if you have one author, or if you have several authors, more than 3, you do the et al. Here. Same as here, so you know there's more than 2 authors here, and it's done also alphabetically in this case here. Generally, the format of the reference is like this. So you have the author or authors, you have the year of publication, you have the article title, the journal title, then the volume, issue, page range, and DOI. And the same colors I used now for this long reference here. This is the correct citation for this reference, and a long author list. In the paper itself, it would then just be Boyke et al., and then you give the year. And in the same paper, you have then the reference list. So as I mentioned to you before, these style files help you formatting the reference list according to the journal standard. And if you change then the journal, you can change the stylist, and thus it's easier. You don't have to format it manually or reformat it. And this is a very simple way of organizing the references here. So alphabetically, all authors are shown. Also, if there's many authors, and then the title of them. So authors basically, then the title, then the journal, and here's the DOI. This is then your reference list. There's also some more odd ways of citations that are not very common, and these include these personal communications. So sometimes the work is not formally published. These are observations or so that somebody talked to you about, and this is called personal communication. And so you could do this by saying, for example, in this case, Schellenhuber, Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, pick personal communication. So explicitly you say personal communication. Or in the case of an observation, you could also use this kind of citation in your text. I noticed this, but don't have any formal data. But it's possible to include this information as another statement, but never use it for central claims, only for background information. So it depends also on the journal if you are allowed to include this kind of odd citation, but most journals will probably allow this personal communication. And there's some other odd citations that I would like to mention here. These are works that are not formally published, or let's say have no gray literature or so. And this, for example, an unpublished manuscript. It was, or a manuscript that was not accepted for publication. Yeah, so how would you refer to this? So you could rather use, in this case, use personal combination or personal observations if the journal guidelines allow this, or in this case unpublished data or results not shown. So again, you can use this, but this should not be important for the central claim of your paper. The purpose is to release data for future use or reduce length, for example, and it can also be used for robustness and analysis, comparison of alternative methods. I often get the questions, how many references to cite? This is difficult because there's a lot of information out there. And just to give you a suggestion, rule of thumb for one idea, cite the original source, the most representative source, and the most recent source for one idea. And of course, you can get overwhelmed, as you see with this nice diagram. So the optimal number of references, somewhere here in the middle, is between too many and too few. And you have to get your way through it, how many this actually entails. It depends, of course, on the subject and on the availability of the references.